Okay, why don't we get started and people can join as they are available. So let's start with introductions, and I'll start with you, Todd.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Todd Brackett. I'm the sheriff in Lincoln County.
Thank you, Pat.
Hi, I'm Pat Kimball. I am retired, and I am the current chair of the Maine Recovery Council.
Maggie.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Maggie McLaughlin. I am a member of the council representing litigating subdivision in City of Portland.
Thank you, Amber.
Hi everyone, my name is Amber Pulsper. I am an LADC and I am the CS at the Comprehensive Treatment Center in Presque Isle.
Thank you, Jamar.
Good afternoon, everyone. Jamal Williams, representing Prison Reentry.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Hello, I am Elizabeth Fortier. I am the coordinator for the Maine Recovery Council.
Brendan.
Hi, Brendan O'Neill from the Maine Attorney General's office.
Thank you, Chastity.
Cassidy Toole, Executive Director of the Maine Recovery Council.
Thank you. And my name is Joe Everett, and I am the president and CEO of the Opportunity Alliance here in South Portland, a member of the council, and I'm the chair of this committee. And welcome everyone to the Program and Grants Committee on January the 27th. The month has flown by. So let's just do a quick sort of check-in on the agenda. I sent the minutes out from last meeting. Sorry, it was a delay. It kind of slipped out of my hands. But we're going to be carrying over a lot of that conversation, as you can see by the minutes, into today's meeting. We're going to talk about the possible co-chair appointments, that anyone interested in that role. We have a presentation by Health Resources in Action, and Chastity will kick that off. We're going to review, Todd's going to present his proposal on funding requests. We're going to talk about no-cost extensions. We'll identify any other business, and then we'll move on from the meeting. So with that, Liz, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hi, sorry I'm late. I am Liz Blackwell Moore. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the director for Cumberland County Public Health.
Perfect. Okay, Chastity, I'm going to pass it over to you to welcome our guests.
Didn't want to work for me. So I think it's just Ben and Brittany. Yes, Elizabeth will bring them over from the other side. So Health Resources in Action, we have brought them on to help us with the prevention work from the work group that Liz and Melissa and 8 other people, was it a 10-person work group? It was big, did last year. And they worked on the first side of this, doing interviews with people to see what worked, what didn't work in our last grant cycle to help us come up with something that works for us and the people applying. And they are going to tell you about this way better than I ever will. So I'm just going to pass it right to them immediately. I will say when they do their presentation, if we can wait until they're done to ask questions, that would be really helpful.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Chastity, for that introduction. Can you hear me okay? All right, great. So delighted to be here with you all, and thank you for sharing some time in your agenda. I recognize you all have a lot going on, but just to introduce myself, my name is Brittany Chen. I use the she, her pronouns, and I'm the Vice President of Health and Racial Equity at Health Resources in Action. And I'll let Ben introduce himself as well while I get the slides up.
Thanks, Brittany. Hi, everybody. Ben Wood, also with the HRIA team, Senior Director of Policy and Practice, the organization. I'm really happy to be here and doing this work with you all. Oh, and I also going to say, just FYI, I have a new puppy who's being really crazy behind me and someone doing some repairs in the house. So it's a little bit kind of crazy and distracting just in case you see me looking off to the side or gesturing oddly throughout the conversation.
We also welcome a puppy sighting, Ben. I think that's good for everyone's soul. So, just putting that out there in case it can happen. Okay, we're here to talk with you today about As Chastity was mentioning, we have been in conversation with the Maine Recovery Council actually for almost a year now. We last came to you all in February of 2025, if you can believe that, to really talk about an opportunity to invest MRC's funds in grant making around prevention and addressing community conditions that prevent substance use and opioid use disorder. And so we are really excited to be officially on board as of October and doing this work with you all. And so today what we wanted to be able to do is just share some of what we have been learning from your past process, as well as through some key informed interviews that we've been hosting. And we would love to engage you all in a discussion about how we move forward. I'm assuming you can see my slides all right and it's in the right view. Okay. We are in business. So just again, to ground you in who Health Resources in Action is, we are a public health nonprofit organization with a vision of healthy people thriving in equitable and just communities. And we partner with individuals, organizations, and communities to transform the practices, policies, and systems that improve health and advance equity. And in our last presentation to you all, we talked just about the importance of upstream work in addressing community conditions to provide, to create communities where everyone can flourish. And so that is really the focus, kind of the overarching focus of what this funding opportunity can be. And so the goal of our engagement is to design an equitable grant-making process that funds and supports community coalitions working to improve community conditions that prevent opioids and substance use disorder. That's kind of like the overarching frame. We know that you all have already addressed in your past funding harm reduction, treatment, and recovery. And so we're really excited to bring to work and build upon the work of the Prevention Ad Hoc Subcommittee to think through what this grant-making process could look like focused on prevention. We have 3 areas of focus in terms of how we are going to be working with you all. We're kind of in this first bullet right here of designing an equitable grant-making process, and we look forward to discussing what that could look like with all of you. We are also focusing on community conditions focused on prevention. What does that look like? What does that mean? And we've gotten some really wonderful insights from our key informant interviewees. And finally, we will be providing capacity building both in the applicant phase to prepare folks to apply for this RFP opportunity, as well as awardees once awarded. So kind of providing capacity building to those coalitions and community organizations that are doing the work. And it's lovely to see Gator, Ben. That is a joyful image right there. All right, so the process to date, we were engaged officially, even though we've been in conversations with you all for a year, almost a year, we were engaged officially in October 2024 and had wonderful conversations with Liz, Elizabeth, and Chastity. We have reviewed the feedback that you all received from your 2024 community grant RFP process, and it's really helpful that you all had done such thorough evaluation of that process. So we did go through all of those documents. And then we also have conducted some key informant interviews, and you can see some of the identities of those who we talked with, but 8 folks in total. And here we are sharing a thematic synthesis of some of the findings. And I'll say just because of the time limitation, we're going to really hone in on 2 key areas for our conversation today. But I do think we've gotten some really great feedback overall about what worked, what didn't, and what kind of supported applicants really helpfully in the last process, and what are some opportunities for improvement. So the goal of today's presentation, share thematic findings, as I said. We have a couple of key takeaways of what we'd like to do from our conversation today. We'd like to affirm MRC, just to cut to the chase, affirm the MRC Prevention Ad Hoc Committee's funding recommendations for prevention-focused strategy. We will be sharing about what we heard from those we talked with and how it really does align with those recommendations that the Prevention Ad Hoc Subcommittee put forward. And so that's one of our key aims. And the second is to discuss some key questions related to the grant-making approach. So that is the overview of what we will be doing. And with that, I'm going to pitch over to Ben to take us through the first theme.
Great. Thank you so much, Brittany. So what we wanted to do is focus a little bit on this first piece around conversations around community conditions and what that meant in our conversations. And the way in which we approached these conversations was to specifically probe and discuss perspectives related to prevention of substance use sort of generally, and again, to specifically understand what prevention from a community conditions approach really could be. So we just want to share some highlights of those conversations informing our work moving forward. Next slide, please, Brett. All right, so this overarching theme of prevention as culture change, this really did come out pretty loudly and clearly for us. And this came out in two main ways. One is that there's an importance being placed from the folks we had conversations with that it's important to change cultural norms about how we prioritize prevention. So in the conversations, it was clear that the experience of the people is that prevention is most often misunderstood and undervalued compared to treatment and harm reduction in the substance use disorder space. And this quote on the screen here really does represent that particular perspective. And this person said, the general public does not understand what evidence-based prevention is. If you look at it like a real disease, like heart disease, we need to teach people that it's preventable. We like instant gratification, and prevention is not that. Really want to sort of emphasize that last piece of liking instant gratification and prevention not being that. That was a perspective that was shared, and an important one across several different conversations. The second way that this concept of culture change emerged through our conversations was through the perspective that it's important to move beyond individual behavior change in prevention activities and to a place where collectively our culture is preventing substance use disorders from occurring in the first place. So what does that mean a little bit more specifically? It means addressing the community conditions that create protective factors to prevent substance use disorders or can lead to increased risk of using substances. And that showed up really concretely in our conversations. You can move to the next slide. So we wanted to share these three quotes. They're really illustrative of the conversations that we had, very specifically about what community conditions and prevention really could be or should be. So I'll read this first one. There are things like housing first or having some of their needs met first before you can expect them to change. I mean, housing and food, it's hard to do anything if you don't have food to eat. And if you're in Maine, it's cold. Another person said, it's funding the people to do the work. It's the baseline funding for the organizational capacity to have someone bring those partners together. It's really the human infrastructure to bring partners together and hold those relationships. And I'll say like this perspective came across several different conversations about the importance of thinking about this opportunity to invest in community condition focused strategies that are going to prevent, hopefully, substance use disorders from emerging in the future, that the imperative is to ensure that there are community organizations, community coalitions that are very grounded in very specific community context in Maine to drive the multi-sector collaboration, to drive the very specific local approaches that can best understand how to approach and invest in shifting and changing community conditions at a local level. This third quote that came out really loud and clear, that's illustrative of several different types of conversations we had, is, I wonder to what extent we can be engaged in doing more to build hope and build connections. You can feel like it's impossible for a lot of families to stay ahead or stay afloat. So I wonder how we can change the way that we relate to one another and building more hope within communities. This was a good one that we wanted to pull out because it's sort of illustrative of the difficult nature of investing in upstream community conditions focused prevention work that is so important, but potentially difficult to measure or difficult to maybe grasp onto, like a lot of other traditional, maybe individual level behavior change focused interventions could be. But really wanting to sort of center this need to understand how to invest in activities and interventions and initiatives that really are about changing the way in which communities and folks are working together and building a more hopeful future. Next slide, please. So boiled down into something a little bit more concrete, this could potentially look like the MRC funding or putting out opportunities that would allow communities to invest in and implement community condition related strategies that are like thinking about shifting and changing housing, income, right? Or basic needs of folks who are in need of a brighter future. Really importantly, empowering local coalitions who know their communities best and who have strong, trusted relationships, strengthening family and child well-being to build resilience, connection, and hope, and long-term investments. So thinking about multi-year investments, flexible funding, really honoring and prioritizing that those local coalitions, the folks on the ground, really do know what's needed the most, and they need some flexibility built into this process to really invest in and implement activities that they know are going to be the most successful. Next slide, please. So to Brittany's first point, all of these key informant interviews really do affirm the approach and very specific prevention framing of the Maine Recovery Council Prevention Ad Hoc Committee funding recommendations document. That's a mouthful to say. So it's really good for us to have heard that we're circling on the same topics and approach, and also that the key informant interviews really did emphasize and reaffirm the cross-cutting recommendations that came from this report. And it reaffirms for us that it's the sort of the guiding document that we're going to be using moving forward to develop the specific language, the guidance, and the capacity building supports for the upcoming RFP process. And next slide. And so like to that point, what were our next steps are to develop that specific language for the RFP aligned with the prevention recommendations, including what we think is really an important next step is to develop some real plain language definitions of what community conditions related strategies and interventions are. There's incredible framing in that long document. That's hard to say. Really incredible framing. But I think what's important is to crystallize on some key language that will be resonant and useful across communities and across populations who will hopefully see themselves in this opportunity. And with that, I think I'm passing it to Brittany to have some conversation around grant making approaches.
That's right. And so what we'll do is we will, I'll walk you through the second theme, which is a little bit more focused on process. Ben walked us through the what, and we're going to talk about the how right now. And then we can open it up for conversation. So the second theme that we wanted to hone in on is equitable grant making approaches and what that can look like. And a part of that was reflecting on what has been done in the past. And it's a little bit of a look forward of what could be done as we rethink and kind of imagine what even more equitable grant making process might look like. So we have a couple of themes that we wanted to highlight within this one theme. The first is really focused on centering equity and lived experience. And this was a common conversation we had across almost all of the key informant interviews. But there was a real kind of clarity from interviewees that funding decisions should prioritize populations that are most affected by the opioid crisis and support organizations with authentic connections to those communities. And I'll say we saw that theme also in that long document name that Ben was referencing, the prevention recommendations, but the real centering, the need to center the populations most impacted. There was a call to focus on smaller or emerging organizations, not just well-resourced nonprofits. And so it's not excluding one or the other, but it's really thinking about both was really an important theme. And finally, the theme that we wanted to highlight here is that there were many folks who talked about the need for more representation of lived experience experts, those from the communities most impacted in decision-making and the deliberation process for grant making, the grant making process itself. And so it's both like who should be funded is kind of part of the first two bullet points, as well as how we should make those decisions and really centering lived experience throughout those processes and through those decisions. You can see this quote, we thought was a very striking quote. Somebody had said, "This is blood money, a different source of money than others. With that comes a different level of weight. Primarily, it should go to the people who have been most directly impacted." Does that always mean that it should go to the organizations led by people with lived experience? No, but they should have demonstrable partnership and relationship with them. So it was a real clarity like I think this quote was illustrative of many people's kind of feeling and clarity that this should be centering lived experience. The second, it is kind of a key barrier that was lifted up, and this is actually something we are very eager to have a conversation with you all about, is the recognition that there is a required public meeting process in the grants deliberation, or in the grant making process. And so the open meeting requirements, it was felt that the open meeting requirements undermine trust in the process and discouraged applicants from applying. It exposed applicants to unnecessary scrutiny and compromised confidentiality, and created difficulty in having honest, nuanced conversations. So this is from the reviewer side. It could create difficulty in having honest, nuanced conversations due to the fear of having their comments misinterpreted. So those first two bullet points are kind of like people worrying that like what the experience would be like as an applicant. And the third bullet point really gets at the challenges that reviewers had in discussing the grant applications openly in a public meeting space. And so you can see on the right, there's a quote that says, "There are applicants that have not and will not apply or regret applying because of the public meeting process." These might seem like separate themes, the lived experience and the public meeting process. They might seem like distinct themes, and they are to an extent, but we do see them also as quite interrelated because the public meeting process may limit who engages in the application process and how they engage. And it also can limit how we center lived experience in an equitable grant making process. And so we offer these two together because I think it's important to hold both of these themes in tandem as we think through what do we do to move forward. So this is actually where we would like to spend some of our time in discussion. So recognizing the importance of centering organizations and communities with lived experience and reducing barriers around public meeting requirements, to what extent would the MRC consider alternate formats to the grant review process to center lived experience and mitigate public meeting challenges? We recognize there are requirements that we need to attend to, and that those are really important to be explicit about. And I think this is an opportunity. We think this is an opportunity to think creatively and really articulate what some of the possibilities might be to mitigate the public meeting challenges and really center lived experience. At the bottom of the slide, you can see, and these are not necessarily formal proposals, but we heard a couple of these types of ideas from our interviews. It could be engaging people with lived experience in the grant review process, which is something we heard as a big theme on 2 slides ago, and anonymizing grant applicants in public meeting discussions, MRC providing written scoring and feedback to be discussed by the community review panel, but like having the review panel be community members, and so on. They're just some ideas to prime the pump. And so what we'd like to do now, I'll see, Ben, if you have anything that you want to amend or add, because I think that is the question that we want to discuss right now. Looks like you're nodding, so I think we've covered it. So now I think it's an opportunity to ask
maybe
questions.
Brittany, the only thing I would add is I think for this conversation, what we think would be helpful, of course, you all can have the conversation you want to have, is to help us understand what your desires could be and what the sort of the ideal future could look like as it relates to this particular barrier and particular issue, and not to maybe go directly to an analysis or a legal analysis of what the barrier is, so that we can understand a little more expansively from the council members really what they want. And then it's our job to come up with some creative solutions and then to really sort of pressure test them with Chastity and your attorney, Brendan.
That's right. And I also just want to say, I don't think we need to come out of this with, we're not going to come out of it with a model that we're going to move forward with. We want to come out of this with ideas. So with that, Todd, you have your hand up. Please go ahead.
I just had a clarifying question. I just want to make sure the barrier that you were talking about in the slide was the part of the process where the applications are all in, they've been reviewed, and now we're discussing who's going to get what? Or
That's
was it
correct.
or was it prior to that when we were doing the review process and there should be more one-on-one communication at that point in the process? I just trying to get my head around it.
My understanding was it was that first part, the first thing that you said, the public review process of all of the applications once they were in, and kind of going through the scoring, going through the comments, and making decisions. So I'm going to pull down the slide just so we can see each other and would love to have a conversation. Go ahead, Maggie.
I'll just throw it out there. We did contemplate ways that we could. I do think it would be useful to talk about practical solutions rather than ideal solutions, because last year we talked about ideal solutions and we weren't able to overcome the hurdles legislatively, which would allow that, or at least we chose not to, and certainly in any near-term timeline, would not be able to overcome this practical barriers, which would allow the MRC itself to have those conversations more in private. And so I'll throw it out there as a starting point. I would be very comfortable with the MRC deciding on a committee that is not comprised of more than one MRC member, but is comprised of an MRC member plus an MRC staff, and then other representatives from the community. And that committee does the initial scoring and provides an overarching recommendation. And then we would have very clear-cut reasons why we would not move forward with their recommendation. And so that way, most of the private discussion can be had and sensitively there. And then we can still make a final decision. I don't necessarily think, wouldn't necessarily support with as much weight a process of anonymizing the grants, in part because I think it's such a small community. We're pretty well aware of who's active in which spaces. And so you'd go through a lot of administrative hurdles to make the documents anonymous, but at the end of the day, it would still be well understood. And I think we have to factor in the impact on that specific community when we are thinking about, is this the right project for that community?
Thanks so much for that, Maggie. I really appreciate it. I'd love to invite folks to bring their own ideas or engage with Maggie's idea as well, Maggie's feedback and ideas as well. Go ahead, Liz.
I think I'll add, I guess I'll just affirm, I agree with Maggie that I feel like having a committee that perhaps is well versed in prevention or in community conditions, or and has a mix of folks with lived experience, being able to look at all the documents and do some, especially with like a really solid review, like scoring criteria for that group. And then we as the council, they make recommendations, we can see, maybe like the high level, what's a summary of the project, what is the high, like who is, just like some summary documents with the scores, and then be able to decide from there. Because I think we have to make a final decision, but I think it would be, I love your idea, Maggie, of saying like, what are the criteria that would make it so that we didn't follow what the group had come up with. I think is a great way to go about it. So I'm all in favor of that.
Thanks, Liz. Appreciate it. Pat, go ahead.
I agree with both Liz and Maggie. It does two things. Again, it was certainly a huge to get us all together to even score the grants, and then to be very public. This way, it gives experts an opportunity to review the grants, and the final say does come to the council, which is very common in other organizations who do philanthropy work. They're the people sitting on the boards aren't the ones scoring it, but they do. You come to a board meeting. This is the recommendations we made. This is why we made those recommendations, and then the full board, or in this case, the council would vote on that. I think again that gives us oversight where we can make changes if we need to, but also it's respectful of the grant process and using expertise, people with an expertise to look at these, because we often sit around the table and say, well, it's not really my expertise, but I'm looking at this, grant and I really don't understand it, but it looks good. This way that prevents that from happening at the same time. So I just think for me, and I'm just one member, I like that concept.
Thank you so much, Pat. You really highlighted kind of that needle we're trying to thread of oversight of the MRC, being respectful of the grant applicants, and really centering the experts in the room. And so I think that was a really wonderful articulation. Thank you. And thank you, Liz, also. Others? We will just give it another 30 seconds, and then we can go into the next steps. I don't know, I can't quite remember. I think we go to 3:40. So why don't we go ahead and move to the next steps, and if folks have other thoughts, we can add at the end.
I was also just going to say if anybody had any questions or thoughts or anything about the initial piece around the community conditions findings as we were describing, basically any questions or anything related to us affirming that we are using the ad hoc subcommittee's prevention document as the framing for the ways in which we're going to be discussing what the community conditions opportunity looks like. So I think maybe there's affirmation there, but if there are any questions about that, we'd love to hear it. Okay. All right, then. So our next steps, this is aspirational. We hope that this can come to fruition. So our next steps from this conversation, and really incredibly helpful, thank you all. And it enables us to start the process of drafting the RFP materials and the overall sort of grant making process. And then what our goal is to come back to this subcommittee at the February 24th meeting to really present and talk about that approach and the specific materials themselves, get your feedback, and then be able to come to the March full MRC meeting, essentially for approval and sign off. If we can do all that and all the stars come together and they align, we'll be in position to be able to support you all in doing an RFP release by mid to late April, which I think really does meet the general goal of getting this out in the at least in the later springtime, so that the whole process can play out and have folks in contract as early in July, August as possible, so they have ample time to actually implement and do this important work. Any questions about the next steps or timeline?
Ben, this is Joe. Just a question, Pat and others, around timeline. I mean, the council is going to wrap up in November. So, and I guess Chastity, do we have the capacity to get this money on the ground by that time? Because it ties to sort of like the speed to which we get the RFP released.
Time before the council wraps in November?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think with this, and I don't think it's going to be as large of an undertaking as our last one. Like it's going to be a lot more manageable, I think.
And can you just remind people listening, what's the dollar amount that we'll be distributing from this round?
Oh, I gotta look because I don't remember off the top of my head unless Elizabeth.
Or anyone who, just for the
I
good of the
think we
cause?
had 2 million.
That sounds right, yeah.
Correct me if I'm
Between
wrong,
2 and 3
somebody.
million.
I think
Yeah.
this one in particular, we had 2. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm looking at our contract spreadsheet right now, and it looks like it's just under. Uh, it's 1.95.
Maggie.
That's a random amount that we went with.
This is pretty operational and probably inherent, but just flagging for HRIA, if you can come back at the next meeting where we're connecting with kind of some scenarios like option A and option B for what that group would look like that does the scoring and why, and then ways in which they could be educated to make sure everybody's on the same page. And that would be great. And I don't know, we'll have to figure out like how that happens in terms of who's doing all that, but would be great if you can feed into giving us some options to look through.
Todd.
I don't doubt Elizabeth. It's been a while since we looked at it, but maybe this is a finance committee question, but I thought there was supposed to be around 4 million, right? I mean, we had divvied that up and spent 9 on the other or so, or talked about it, and then because things happened and things went different. But part of it's a little bit confusing. Just understanding what it was that we had allotted originally, talked about. Not that we're bound to that by any means, but and where
Well,
we left off, Liz, I really thought it was closer to 4 million, but
it's 4 million total, Todd, for prevention. This is like this was one of the goals. So this one was 2 million. 1 million went to the Maine CDC to do 18 to 25-year-old prevention work, and they actually have that money and are off and running. And then we had another million set aside for 2 generational programming. So it is still, you're right, it's still 4. And we'll have to discuss that, like how to, I think we were hoping to mirror some of this RFP process, some of what we learned here for that 2-gen approach work. So I think we still have that to work through and talk about how we might do that. It might not match, we might not be able to match the same timeline because we might not be able to match what they're doing for this other RFP. We might have to stagger them once we learn more and whatever staff time we have to do it. But that's maybe a conversation for another time. But you're right. There's definitely 4 million in there, Todd.
I thought so. That makes sense. Thanks, Liz. Joe, just a quick follow-up, if I could, as I think about the earlier conversation about the process and how things are reviewed and discussed and the concerns that were raised. I wonder how. I'm not opposed to what's being suggested. I'm just wondering how, when it comes back to the council, what's going to prevent some of that same discussion from happening at an open meeting? You know what I mean? I don't. Council members are diverse. We come with different backgrounds by design and have different connections in the community. And anyway, I'm not sure. I understand what you're trying to do. I'm just not sure it's going to get us there.
Pat or Chastity, do you want to attempt to? Because I just don't know all the details of HRIA and such. So, or maybe Ben and Brittany too, just around that process, Todd.
Well, Ben, did you want to go?
I mean, I think it's a great point. I think that the process itself is it's there's always going to be opportunity for there to be public conversation about specific organizations just by the nature of how this has been set up and what the legislative mandate is. I think what is being suggested is to mitigate as much as possible the airing of a lot of very personal information and not personally identified automation. That's not what I mean, but like really sort of personal approaches of organizations and the sort of the ways in which those perspectives and approaches are valued and talked about and judged. So we're trying to like mitigate as much as possible those types of public conversations. And to your question and to your point, what we can do is provide some options about different ways that we can continue to try to mitigate the final decision-making process that the MRC engages in as they're weighing the recommendations that might come from this committee.
I co-sign what Ben said. And it's something we will be continuing to hold and figure out how do we create the right the framing for the conversation to be had as well, so that everyone understands kind of how to engage in the conversation. I saw Pat, you had your hand up. I don't know if you wanted to add anything.
No, I just was agree. I was going to say basically what Ben said, particularly in the end, that the process we're talking about today, the actual grant process will still, of course, need to go to the full council. What we're talking about today is concepts, and basically HRIA is here to help us develop what that process is. So again, the full council would have to vote if we change that process at all. This is just, again, relieving some of the work of the volunteers that are there, and letting, but again, always in mind that the final decisions and any work that the MRC does is always there for public view. But this was just a way to really have some experts look at the grants, bring their recommendations there, but the council will still have a say if they see part of those recommendations, an agency that they have concerns over, they still can bring that to the attention of the council.
Great. Well, with that, I think we have concluded our part of the conversation. Really appreciate all this wonderful feedback that you've provided. And thank you for your time. If there are any other questions that come up, you can reach out to Chastity, and Chastity can get that information over to us as well. I'm sure we will have a continued conversation. We look forward to hopefully seeing you all next month.
Thank you, guys.
Also, just so you all know, I hope to just have them on the agenda for the next couple of months for both program and grants and MRC, so that way we already have it there in case something comes up.
Perfect. Well, with this, in the spirit of grants, Todd, should we pass it off to you? Chastity, are we good to go? You're up, Todd.
Well, thank you. I'll try to be brief. I would just really like to see us as a council consider at least or develop a policy for small one time, I didn't know what to call it, non-reoccurring. First off, as a disclaimer, I'm not any dollar amounts that I've talked about, any titles that I've talked about, I don't know what to call it. And I'm not necessarily married to the money aspect of it. I think back to our original, or one of our original budget discussions, and we talked about setting aside X amount of money for one-time funding. Aside from other initiatives of the council. And I don't know that that was ever finalized or left. And I don't, it seems to me like the amount was around $1 million. I'm not suggesting that we need to earmark that amount of money for this kind of a program, but and again, I'm just trying to keep it simple, small amounts, meeting you're falling within the pillars of the council, a streamlined process that in my mind, from start to finish would take 30 days or less, and as much online as possible. I was really impressed with, and I don't even know if this is possible. My state colleagues on the call with us here might have some input whether we could use the vendor self-service system DPS used for the last grant that I applied for. It was really simple. Anyway, and I think by contracting with or asking or seeking a community partner to actually manage the funds, get them out quickly, have a boilerplate contract for it. If somebody, my thought process is that, well, I could go on. I think you get the gist of what I'm trying to accomplish. I think is important. I think from my perspective, it would, again, just it would be a fixed amount, whatever the council decides annually, or if they decide not to fund it for whatever reason, that's fine too. The policy would reflect that if it was adopted. And it'd be an open solicitation essentially, for whatever time frame we sat. I just used the calendar year. Um, and one or two things would happen by the 1st of December or whatever. Chastity and our staff says we need time to review and close out whatever happens there. I was thinking 30 days would be appropriate, but it may not. So either December 1st or whenever the funds are exhausted, then it's just closed. And we move on to the next year if that's the direction the council wants to go in. Again, my thought process is that the management of it, once a decision's made, that it could be handled by the subcontractor. The contract could be handled by the subcontractor. The reporting could be handled and evaluation could be handled by the subcontractor. My words, I don't know if that's the right word. As far as and to me, it's like, the recovery center in Lincoln requested $2,000 for to replace the refrigerator. Or maybe that's a bad analogy, but whatever it is for a specific program. The reporting on that should be relatively simple and or we try to keep it that way, and either they purchased it or they didn't. You know what I'm saying? So I don't want to spend this. Just these are all just ideas, folks. I'm far from an expert. Any documents you've seen, I just cut and pasted. I used Tessa's model for the policy, and just put the bullet points in there the way I was trying to think it. I used DPS's language for the what the RFP might look like and what the requirements are. Likewise, it would be really easy to duplicate the online application and make it conform with whatever priorities we set or don't set. So, I to me, this is a little different than the other policy. This isn't necessarily emergency stuff. This is just, quick, in my mind, one time. That's not to say that somebody can't reapply in another year for something else, but, we obviously would want to talk about things like that. So we're not duplicating things and, those kind of things, but I think there's a need. I see it right here, and I watch people right here in Lincoln County who take money out of their own pockets to pay somebody's airline ticket to get them to a detox or rehab bed that's not available here in Maine. And in short notice, I think it's great that what happens when those resources aren't available? Then what happens if that individual is trying to get into treatment? Or I could give you 100 examples. You all have a bunch probably in your own mind. So that's where I'm at.
Thank you, Todd. Pat, your hands up.
Yeah, Todd, thank you for the effort you put into this. And despite the fact you said you're not a policy writer, it came across pretty well for me. I just have a couple questions to ask. One is, well, not questions, but the concern is around the minimum of money. The max is fine at 50,000 for me for small grant, but you have to remember that you're going to have a minimal because of the amount of effort it takes us to do that work. Somebody can't request $1,000. It's going to cost us half of that in time and effort to get that dollar out the door within the current system. And we can't overflow them either. We can't say, well, we have 12 requests at $1,000 to push through. So just a consideration to look at a minimal of what that is. Is your intent when you write this, I just want to make clear that the application would go in to, say, for instance, Chastity and maybe Elizabeth, they would review it, look to see if it should go further. If they think it should go further for consideration, then they would bring it to the council. Council would review it and vote on it. Is that your vision of that?
Yeah, that's my vision. And then once the council approves it, the information goes right to whoever we've contracted with. They take care of getting the funds out and exercising whatever contract agreement needs to be in place, for that to happen.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Maggie.
Todd, I want to thank you for putting this together. I think it's so helpful to have something to respond to on this. And I can feel where it's going. I think I'm sometimes struggling between this one and the off-cycle one, and sometimes struggling with what our intentions are and what I'm sometimes here is our like operational gaps. So let's say they want 2,000 for a refrigerator. It's still going to take us 3 months to turn around a contract for that. Or I think your example is a great one of, somebody needs a detox bed. It's available in this location. We just need to provide the transit, that kind of thing. Would you be open to basically bucketing these and giving them to other organizations to distribute faster? So I'm thinking about how we have money that I believe we gave to the recovery residences, and one of the organizations is holding the bucket and then issuing it quickly for transportation. And so if we make the buckets and then we make the limits and we attach basically an operational fee, pay them for their time, and then allow them to hold that money, then they may be able to kick it out faster than wrangling all of us around the rodeo to review. But we could get to the same intent. Would you be comfortable with that kind of model?
Maggie, you took the words right out of my mouth. That's exactly what I'm suggesting is that we develop through our existing process an RFP. We search for that third party to handle and whatever funding the council decides is appropriate is sent to them in that more formal contract, which will take months, which is fine. You know what I mean? Through the existing process we have in place now. And then yes, exactly that third party would then just once we go through the process, they would take care of any paperwork that we need with whoever's getting the funds. They would send the check directly to them. Obviously, there's going to be their administrative fee that's part of that process, right? I'm assuming, but hopefully we keep that to a minimum and. It would be a win-win. But yes, I was thinking that once we issue that, the council would decide first off, is this a good idea or not? And then what amount of money should we set aside? What are the minimums on both sides, minimum and maximum, right? I'm really flexible on those. And then my thought would be to go to RFP, get that third party in place. And then once we get that done, get it set up and get it going. So the actual turnaround from the time we get applications could be significantly reduced through the exact process you
And we
suggest.
wouldn't have to do a minimal if it was with another organization that can, I'll say this nicely, can get those checks out faster. So then we can. So they may be, we may want to do, not worry about the minimal. But we would have to, again, so I love the idea of putting it in another organization that does this kind of work. We give them a set amount of money, we give them the guidelines. And I think it's
The only thing the only part of that, which is and maybe it's just in my mind, and I'm not married to it, is that it seems like it would be cool if the council could still be involved in that review process, right? You know what I mean? And then they take care of the rest of it. Just to make sure that the council's priorities are being met And I think it's a great tool for the council to stay engaged with the folks who are on the ground doing what we need to do. And anyway, thank you.
Liz.
I I think this is like, it's like, how do we, I think you're getting so much closer to how do we find this like middle space between wanting to fund stuff that comes up quickly and also um sort of lessening the incredible burden that might come with this, with if you open it up just like broadly for our currently limited staff, like sort of trying to find that middle space. And I guess I would go back to kind of what I love, this idea of finding organization or organizations that can fund stuff quickly. I wonder if we can go back to Maggie's idea of choosing buckets. Like, I think coming up with where the council, I'm not sure, Todd, I love the idea of the council and being involved in the decision making, but I don't think we're going to be able to do it fast enough with what the intent of this is. But I do wonder, what if the council did, like Maggie suggested, come up with a set of key priorities? Like, one is, it could be that we decide it's transportation or to treatment. I mean, we have a fund that we do right now that is through Department of Public Safety, and it's for recovery housing or treatment. And we do it through an organization. Like, we process all the payments, but anyway, I guess it can, I'm not saying I want to do that. I'm just saying there's a way to do it in which you say, this is for recovery housing, this is for but we come up with what are those 5 buckets, and it may need to be different organizations. If it's for say the recovery community centers that need money, that needs to be like a different bucket, and someone else is going to have to be able to give that money out quickly. And that might be different from, say, groups that are doing some other aspect of our priorities. But anyway, I'm agreeing with you, but I think the council I'm agreeing with Maggie, but I think the council could decide on 5 things to simplify it. Sorry, my brain's working not so well today.
That's well. No, we're following you, Liz. No, we followed you. Amber and then Deb.
Yeah, so I absolutely love this idea. I think this is fantastic. Let me make sure I'm not on mute. So I just kind of wanted to like play off some of the things that Liz said, and what about, in these buckets, we can have, the stipulations and the requirements for transportation. Is it for a higher level of care? Is it for, like emergency housing, and have preset what these stipulations or these things that we would like met be already predetermined? Would that take a little bit of the work out when trying to access these funds?
If my thought, yeah, I like those ideas. I was trying to keep it simple. I was trying to use the pillars and as the guidelines, right? But if that's too broad, or that's unmanageable for the staff to kind of move this along, I'm okay with. I'm just trying to keep it open ended, right? We're talking about, again, small amounts here, not long-term funding, not emergency funding, right? So, this isn't in a perfect world. Todd would love to see it happen within 30 days, and many times it can. Sometimes it may take 60 because under the way I was thinking, if it has to come before the council, and we've just met and we don't meet again until the following month or whatever. Yeah, so I'm not opposed to any of those ideas. I was just thinking of keeping it broad, as long as it fits within our clearly established pillars and the sub topics that we have underneath those.
Well, so I guess my thoughts, I'm sorry, like, what about if we hypothetically put $50,000 in for transportation, with under the guise of, it's for detox, it's for rehab, things like that. Would we really have to go in depth other than that? Would the individual just say, hey, the funds are there, we need to get an individual from, Madawaska to to Portland for detox and rehab. You know, we, instead of having to go through the process, the money's already there. We can access, you know, the agency that's distributing it and get this individual where they need to go.
Again, I'm 100% open to that. My thought process is what about the one we didn't think about that clearly falls within something that the council's priorities, our pillars, something that the council would want to fund. Then we're at a dead end again. You know what I mean? So that's the only reason I was trying to keep it broad, small amounts. But I'm 100% okay with that, Amber, really. I think that's a great step. It's getting us in the right direction. Sorry, Deb, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's quite all right. I was just going to offer a couple of thoughts and ideas because we have something similar. And Joe, you probably are thinking the same thing I am. And that's OBH has RAP funding, and RAP funding is sort of ancillary, miscellaneous funding for things that you wouldn't necessarily think of for behavioral health, like somebody needs their electricity paid for, or they're going to get cut off and they have insulin that they have to keep refrigerated, or, you know, it's the or. So I think, you know, if you wanted to operationalize this there, and let me just say, and OBH, the department, we don't administer the funds. We contract out. So those funds are administered by someone else. And there is an application process, and there are cut and dry opportunities to have funding. I think the important piece is having a threshold. So if we were to say, and again, we don't need to go into exactly how we're going to do this, but if we were to say 50,000 goes to transportation, then it would be at the discretion of the vendor to approve for transportation up to $500. And if it's more than $500, then it needs to go to the council for approval. Because what if somebody wants to go to rehab in California and it's going to cost $3,500 to get them there? Yeah, I mean, I'm absolutely making this up, but I think that there are ways to stay within the buckets, and there are ways for the council to also be involved. And I think that the council's involvement would be if it exceeds a certain threshold, or if it falls outside of the buckets that we've created. So if we create 4 or 5 buckets and there's a request for something outside of, I think it would be a matter of the council voting on whether or not it's something that still aligns with our goals and philosophies and mission. So I don't think it has to be so rigid that we couldn't or shouldn't entertain the other opportunities. And I also, recognizing I came in late, do see this is different than emergency funding. That doesn't mean the same vendor couldn't also handle emergency funding, but I do see it as different.
Great ideas. Thank you.
The RAP fund process could work really well. And we could talk more about that the way we do it here. There's a committee, it's very fair, it's very fast, as fast goes in our world, but yeah. Okay, thank you, Deb. Brendan, then Jamar.
Just real quick, glad to hear about the program Deb talked about. The fact that it exists and is, you know, functioning well and is successful, it makes it something that, you know, we definitely ought to look at for just copying. And you know, and with, you know, Todd's input, I just wanted to, without fully endorsing, say I like the idea that Maggie and Liz and Amber talked about of the predetermined buckets, because I had been concerned about, you know, the amount of work it takes to ensure that an application is asking for something that is, you know, evidence-based and meets the approved uses, you know, can be a lot of work. So to the extent that there are, you know, that the buckets have narrowly and predetermined the particular, you know, approved use, you know, with, you know, and, you know, ensure that it's like tied very closely to that approved use and, you know, evidence-based use, that would, I think, speed things and simplify things personally. And then you could have a bucket that is other, where, you know, Todd, to your concern that there's going to be unanticipated requests, those the council could, in theory, like more, dig into. Thanks.
I think that would work perfectly.
Oh, and I was just thinking that in terms of the timeline, probably 45 days. Um, maybe a good timeline because of where 30 days may be from the time that the person actually submits. And the other thing in regards to the threshold, um, on a lower, I start thinking about the lower end of how many application or how many applications someone has to process if the threshold is too small. So say for instance, if it's only $500 and you have 1,000 people putting in for $500, that becomes a full-time job for somebody who's doing the processing. So just putting that out there just as something that we may want to start considering when thinking about this the floor, so to speak, on asking for the monies. And and there's a third thing. How much is there a percentage that we're allocating to the person that's going to be processing for us, or is there just a set amount, just so that they could be able to know or possibly um, bring somebody on board to handle those things? So that's something that's standing out for me.
Those are great points. I was thinking that if as I process this, and if we have the buckets and the buckets are pretty clear and they're pre-established, Jamar, maybe it would be a little simpler to put those through. As far as the vetting process goes, if there is a huge number of them, I don't know. And I don't know if we will know until we try it. Um, but I think those are all great points.
Todd, you were anticipating an RFP process though, right, for the vendor?
Yeah, only because I assume we have to as a council. And I think when it comes to like Jamar's point about what percentage would go to the vendor, I don't know if that goes back to those percentages we talked about early on, Brendan. You know what I mean? Whatever that administrative percentage was or is. I don't know if that's the amount, or if it's somehow different than that, but yeah, and I don't envision changing necessarily the process that we've used to bring on other vendors at this point. I think it seems to be working. So I wasn't envisioning anything necessarily different there or reinventing the wheel there as much as I was once that's established, what would the process look like, and could we use something similar to this online system, and just speed up the process somehow, as long as everybody it meets the criteria.
So yeah, as we talk about, this conversation has been very focused on individual needs. Deb, you and I could probably put something together on the wrap fund and how it rolls. And I forget how many people TOA serves, but we, I think, have a 20-hour person a week. And then we have a committee of local providers who vote. I think it's very fair, very effective, but we could maybe, rather than slow down the process, maybe we could write a simple description of how it rolls. Because it is, I think, very effective and it doesn't take 45 days, I don't think, does it, Deb?
It definitely
It's
does not.
pretty fast, yeah.
And there's also a process if the ask is outside of a routine ask.
Right.
So it allows for that, which is, I think, going to be very important for MRC.
Yeah. And then we report everything back to OBH, kind of her checks
I'm
and
gonna step
balance.
out of my office for just a second. I'll be right back.
Okay, Chastity, your hands up.
When you're talking about that, is that something accessible across the state, no matter where anybody is?
Yes.
Okay.
It's a great resource.
So for if we did something that way, would it still be a single vendor or is it multiple in different places?
Could be a single vendor. It doesn't have to be. We do have more than one. That's just the way it happens to have been structured forever. But it doesn't, RAP started before technology really came into use the way it is now. So, and it's also behavioral health, and people get connected to their provider organizations and their communities. But for MRC, representing the entire state, I don't think that it necessitates having more than one. I actually think it would be better to have one for this
Yeah.
particular purpose.
Well, yeah, that's why I was asking too.
Yeah. So Pat, oh, yeah, the screen's jumping around. Should we bring this back as a concept to the council meeting? And then we can do some work, get some information pulled together for the committee. But what are your thoughts on sort of just keeping it moving forward?
Yeah, I think it should be at least discussed in some way, or you'll lose momentum. And we don't want it to get lost, because this committee seems to think that it's a so I would bring it up at that. Let some of the council members have some questions. Maybe then we could tighten up this policy a little, and then determine, how are we going to do it, outside vendor, or whatever, and make an actual proposal maybe in March or April. But I think if it comes to the February meeting, again, it's on the table. If people are adamantly opposed, or don't like it at all, you'll get some feedback on that, but you may get some good ideas. But I think I'd bring it up, um, only because you want it on the agenda. If it doesn't get on the agenda, it loses momentum, and you don't want to do that.
No, that's okay, great. Okay, well, this is great. We're moving this along, so we'll do that and we'll do some work in between the meetings. And then Chastity, I'll pass it over to you for the the no cost extension discussion.
Um, and you're still gonna do your vice chair.
We're gonna table that, Chastity. Let's table
Okay.
that because everyone's not here and I'd like to have the full group.
Okay. Um, so Joe sent a draft policy and outline for grantees to fill out. Elizabeth and I went through and workshop a little bit for what we think would be helpful on our end. I think you guys all have it in your emails. A few questions on that. How involved do you all want to be? From our perspective, much easier and smooth for everybody if, for the most part, like we could just approve things when they come through, and it's more of a discretion. If it's something that looks problematic, we have more questions, then bring that to whether it's the committee or the council to discuss before doing approval. But most of it, I mean, it's going to be pretty cut and dry, and we know we don't move quickly when we have to bring everything to a meeting. So that was one question of it. Do you guys have it there? Do you want us to pull it up?
I think our goal, like I just sort of went through all the ones. TOA does this all the time. So we request, unfortunately, things happen, like you said last month, Chastity. So I think it's in working with foundations, especially, it's usually the board's not making the decision, the staff are. So I think and then sometimes I know like we've had extension NCEs with Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. And I don't know, sometimes I remember like we may have got a month of report. Maybe it was by mistake of like maybe quarterly of like all the NCEs. So that would just be a quick like list. Here's the NCEs for the quarter. And then if you have, like you talk to Pat regularly, you could, if there's like a scary something or something seems risky, it's really risk management, then you'd bring it and then you guys could decide on the council. But I think that it will be very hard for organizations if we don't give them the green light pretty quickly. They'll have to forfeit money. So my vote would be as fast as possible to serve communities better. So I think the staff should do it. And if it needs to be risen up, then we can do that.
Yeah, and none of this is going to include anyone asking for more funds. So that won't be part of any discussion for this right now.
And as far as the process, Chastity, just my opinion is that I just pulled from others. You make it your, like, I think it's, you capture what you need. You're running the show. Whatever. In time, you'll learn. You might see something different you want to add, but I think that you need the discretion to kind of work on that as you see fit. And you can work with the chair. It's Pat today, but when we have a new next year, but I think it's something that staff should manage, in my opinion.
100%
That
agree.
across the board.
I
All
agree
right.
too.
And Todd, thank you. Thank you. That was really great. Great work. Great conversation. I think we're moving it. So thank you for all that work. Um,
Well, with this policy then, if you guys want to provide any feedback at the next meeting, the full council meeting, otherwise, like we'll have it in your agenda packets for the next meeting and you guys can vote to approve it or not, so we can get things going. And if there's our specific questions, we'll reach out to who we think has the most knowledge on it to update it.
I'm sorry, I may have missed this or not heard this properly. So you're bringing it back here next
No,
month?
we'll bring it to the February full council,
Perfect.
so
Okay.
you can
Awesome.
just get it
Great. Yes.
approved.
Perfect.
Um,
That's great. Thank you.
I think timelines were the only thing, the other piece. Do you want it to be, we gave options of 60, 90, and 180 days? Is that good for the max on the extension?
Oh, sometimes we've got a year.
Are you?
Like, yeah, it's a big.
Okay, so what
I
does
would,
this group,
Oh,
go
go
ahead,
ahead,
Deb.
Deb.
okay, I was just about to raise my hand. I would eliminate the 60 and I would do 90, 180 in a year.
Yeah.
Okay,
Because yeah, if they're asking for the no cost extension, chances are good that they need more than that 60 days. Even 90 is probably short.
But I like those thresholds, Deb. I think those are good timelines.
They're more, that's what I've seen actually
Yeah.
come to play.
okay. And we put it as, get it to us 90 days before the end of the contract.
Mm-hmm.
All right, those are the main questions we had.
That's great. Perfect. Todd, did we cut you off?
No, that's exactly what I was going to say. That's great. Thank you.
Okay, great. So we do want another conversation about a co-chair, but I knew that people had to jump off, so we will put that back at the top of the agenda for next time. Is there any other business we want to bring to the group? Todd.
Not really other business. Are there next steps? Is there anything? I'm in my worker bee mode, right? So, is there anything that we can do? Deb, I mean, as far as um, encompassing some of the discussion into the policy draft, to just keep this moving forward. Um, is there anything I can do? I guess is all I'm asking to help the committee move forward for our next meeting or whatever you see as next steps, Joe.
So two things, what I'd say, Todd, is one is that we're going to raise it conceptually at the full council meeting in February. So that's big. So people get that teed up. Deb and I will then kind of look at what the wrap fund does, get that out to people so that we're not kicking the can till next month. So maybe we can have like a tight, your stuff's great. I think now it's procedural now or process, like in terms of.
Take it, leave it, change it. I'm flexible. We're headed in the right direction. I'm happy.
No, me too. I think it's great. So we'll work on that. We'll get that out, and then we can be, and then it can also prompt other conversations throughout the month that by email we can sort of look at a process. And I know other foundations, if we want to dig deeper, and it's mostly at the agency level, but I know John T. Gorman has a once a year special fund. I forget what they call it, but I know last month people mentioned this, so that's also something we can look into. But I think we're definitely moving in the right direction. Amber.
Yes, so this is a little off topic, and I don't know if I should share this here or at the full council meeting, but I am going to be going up to the Northern Maine Wellness Clinic in Van Buren to check out the progress. I know the building's just about complete, painted. So just to kind of get some pictures and see how everything's moving along there. Pretty excited about it.
Mm.
So I don't know if I should bring that to the council or not, but I'll be going up there, I think, within the next couple weeks with some pictures and feedback on how things are going.
Always
That's
good to see
awesome.
success. Amber,
Yes.
please share.
Please share. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, pretty excited about it. Like I'm excited to see what he's done with it.
And that's great for Van Buren. It's wonderful.
That's great for Aroostook County in general because you've got very, very limited treatment options. So I think this is going to really help bridge the gap in services, especially in the St. John Valley.
Yeah. Okay, well, we'll definitely bring it up at the council meeting too, I think, right, Pat? Pat, you seem, yeah, this is awesome.
Absolutely. I love to hear that the money that we invested in is out there helping, particularly those underserved areas. So Amber, please, I love it when you share, and I'm sure others feel the same.
So just in terms of our next agenda, so we have MRIA coming back, right, Chastity? Next month or the next couple of meetings.
HRIA, yep.
HR, sorry. My
Okay.
acronyms. There's too many acronyms in our world. HRIA, next month we'll also talk about the co-chair process. Anything else that from today's meeting?
I just have a
Oh, well, and we'll
question.
bring back the policy we just talked about.
I just had a quick question.
Oh, sorry, Jamar, go ahead.
Do we ever highlight any of the say like the work that Amber just spoke of? Just say like the work that Amber just spoke of, how she's going up there to take pictures. Is there a place, do we ever just consistently highlight folks that have been receiving the monies?
Consistently, no. Any presentations that I've been to since we started, I've included like the few pictures that I have and I've asked around for others. Ideally, at some point, I'd love to on a consistent basis. Currently, we don't have capacity to do all the things we want to do, unfortunately.
But maybe it would be nice, Chastity, and this is not to put much work on you, but your thought, Jamar, like it'd be great maybe every meeting to have a mission moment. Like if you could just solicit ongoing from all our grantees to say, send us a paragraph and we could share. I think that people would love that. And every meeting just have a mission moment, Jamar, kind of to what you're suggesting. But I think, Pat, we've done it at when we had the annual or at the summit, right? We've
Yeah.
highlighted. But that's only once a year. I think it'd be great for the public to hear ongoing.
But I love that, I serve on one board that does a mission moment before every board meeting. And it's not long. It's 5 or 6 minutes. It's not long, but it really does make you feel like it sort of it starts the meeting off on a real positive note, that the work that we're doing is a good thing. And again, you get to hear about different things in the community. And it's not long. It's just that mission moment. Yeah.
It's very grounding.
Yeah.
I will just add that as part of the reporting, we do ask them to share any general achievements. And then we did open that up to them to send pictures. And so I can share what has been submitted before. I will just say I'm a little bit hesitant to ask for that regularly because they love to share information. And some of them shared like probably close to 100 photos, which is great to see, but some of them are maybe not the most useful for seeing some of the program activities. They're lovely to see people enthusiastic about the work. But in terms of sharing that all with you, I personally just don't know how effective of a use of our time that would be to distribute hundreds of photos from like one organization. Again, love to see that they're having fun and doing great things. But we got pictures of a bunch of people eating hot dogs at a recovery center. So that's awesome. But I'm not sure that that's something that you all need blowing up your inboxes.
I promise I won't take 100 pictures.
No, we'd love to see Amber, though. That's great.
All the more reason I can remember interviewing Chastity for the job. One of her goals was to do that website. It's a perfect place for those to be, is a Recovery Council website where we could put those photos up of all the programs and the recovery going on in the state.
I just think it's important for everybody to have access to the positive impact that we're having throughout this state and how those things are being utilized. And it's kind of validation for us. Like, yeah, we have helped make this happen for this community.
Absolutely. And that's kind of the intention that where I was kind of driving in that direction there, Amber. And so if there was that space, Pat, where we at some point, maybe that's the goal of the year by the end of the year, is to have a place where something could live. And so we could see more than just the numbers and the data, and folks could start to celebrate themselves and say, hey, and point towards that place as well.
For sure. That's great. Okay, I think that's a wrap. Good meeting, everyone. Thank you so much. And we'll see you all at the council
All
meeting.
right, Joe. Early. Have a good evening,
Okay,
everyone.
bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.